into things. So this is courtesy of Adam Schefter, where it says the Browns are releasing veteran wide receiver Cedric Tillman. Per sources, Cleveland spent 2 early 2026 draft picks on wide receivers, and now Tillman is out. Now, we knew this dude was going to be gone. I mean, Cedric Tillman, he's been terrible since he got with the Browns, but now the talks are picking up that, hey, Jerry Jeudy could be next.
That is the move that changed the entire conversation. Cedric Tillman is reportedly out, and suddenly Cleveland's receiver room does not look crowded by accident. It looks like the Browns are deciding who still fits.
But, you know, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, Casey Concepcion's been a standout. Denzel Boston has been a standout. Isaiah Bond has been a standout. Jerry Jeudy is getting paid way too much to be have the 4th best production all the way up to the regular season out of all the receivers throughout camp. It's just not.
And notice where the pressure immediately shifts. Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, and Isaiah Bond are being described as camp standouts, while Jerry Jeudy is the veteran carrying the biggest expectations and the biggest financial weight in that room. But the interesting question is not whether Cleveland has younger options. The question is what those younger options allow Cleveland to do that it could not realistically do before. Because there are 2 completely different ways to read this roster battle. One says the rookies and younger receivers are making Jeudy expendable. The other says their emergence might finally create the exact environment Jeudy needs to become more useful. Those 2 interpretations lead to completely different decisions, and later there is one football argument from this discussion that makes the idea of simply cutting Jeudy much harder to defend.
Get to it.
You think there's any chance they could cut Jerry Jeudy?
No, didn't really think so.
The reason I asked, CBS Sports had like cut candidates, and they listed Jerry Jeudy as a possible cut candidate for the Cleveland Browns, and I'm like, not yet. But my issue is I can't find a reason to not cut him.
Why are you keeping him? There's only one reason I think he stays on the team.
Why is that?
I think it's clear the starting quarterback has the best friend on the team.
There is the provocative version of the argument. If you cannot immediately identify a compelling football reason to keep Jeudy, why carry the expensive veteran? Then the conversation drifts toward his relationship with Deshaun Watson. That friendship might be real, but friendship cannot be the serious roster argument here. Cleveland has to decide whether Jeudy makes this offense function better, especially with a quarterback situation that is already under a microscope. That distinction matters. Fans can speculate about who likes whom inside the building, but roster decisions eventually expose priorities. If Jeudy stays, the stronger explanation should be that the coaching staff believes his presence makes the offense more stable, more difficult to defend, or easier for the younger players around him. And that is where this story gets much more interesting than a simple veteran versus rookies camp battle.
Speaking about this, Lima, you had said yesterday that you're not hearing anything that's coming out of the building about players or anything being opposed to Deshaun Watson or anything. For that matter, you're not hearing anything about the quarterback, the backup quarterback. We're not allowed to say his name, apparently. It's dumb.
Yep, you got to reset it.
We got to reset the what? The
clock.
The clock,
yeah,
okay.
We had gone an entire 10 minutes without mentioning his name. But darn tootin'. Now we're right back where we started.
You're not going to hear anything. I think both are likable to their teammates. And hell, you heard Shedeur back on. You heard the backup back on Saturday, where he said he didn't really care for people booing Deshaun Watson. So they seem to get
That piece is important because it pushes back against one of the easiest narratives surrounding Cleveland right now, that the locker room must be divided according to the same quarterback lines that exist among the fan base. According to the discussion here, there has not been clear evidence coming from inside the building that teammates have split into hostile camps around Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders. In fact, Shedeur publicly objecting to fans booing Watson points in the opposite direction. Players can compete for jobs without turning the locker room into a civil war. And that matters for Jeudy because one argument for removing him would be that Cleveland needs to clean out personalities attached to one quarterback or another. Based strictly on what is presented here, that would be an assumption, not evidence. The more useful question is football. Does Jeudy still have a role that justifies his place when Concepcion, Boston, and Bond are demanding snaps? That is where the Browns suddenly have a problem they did not have a year ago. It is a good problem, but it forces uncomfortable choices.
Does Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston make Jerry Jeudy's job easier?
I thought so.
Okay.
And in a way, I thought in a way, vice versa, because we know he's had his issues here, and the drops kind of come
Yes.
and go, but when they come, and he just seems like he's mentally out of the game. But we also remember the game where, it was like a record-setting game against his old team. Like, we know nobody's ever disputed that the talent was there or wasn't. What we were always reacting to is he a good guy to have in the locker room? Well, locker rooms change every year, obviously.
Of course.
And, Jeudy's been at everything. He's been a little inconsistent in camp. He's had days where he's been great, and he's had other.
Now we get to the first serious argument for keeping him. If Concepcion and Boston are legitimate threats, Jeudy may actually become harder to defend because defenses cannot devote the same attention to him. That sounds obvious, but Cleveland's context matters. Jeudy has always had ability. Even the criticism in this conversation acknowledges that. The issue has been consistency. There are stretches where he looks like the kind of receiver who can punish coverage, and there are stretches where drops or visible frustration make the entire operation feel unreliable. That makes this season different. The Browns may no longer need Jeudy to be the receiver who rescues the passing game. They may only need him to be a capable veteran component inside a deeper group. That is a much easier job. Think about what changes structurally. If Boston can win above the rim and force defenders to respect his size, if Concepcion can threaten defenses horizontally and create separation, and if Bond can stress the secondary with speed, then Jeudy is no longer automatically the obvious target for coverage help. Suddenly, the highest-paid receiver in the room does not necessarily have to produce like a traditional number one every Sunday to have value. But there is a catch, because once you make that argument, Jeudy's contract and roles start pulling in opposite directions. A veteran being useful is not automatically the same thing as a veteran being worth what the team is paying him. That is the tension Cleveland has to solve.
Career, but I think you want to start the season with as much weaponry as you can, unless you feel like he's demanding the ball or anything. And have you ever felt that Jeudy has been that guy?
No.
Here in Cleveland, I don't think it's been that.
Demanded the ball.
I don't think he's even in a position to demand the ball, because I think that the attention's been on Boston and Concepcion the whole time, and even Isaiah Bond really could be taking snaps from him this year.
Yeah, but even going back to the last couple of years, I'm sure he wants the ball. He's a wide receiver. He should want the ball.
But has he been?
Who's the highest paid in the room?
It would be him.
Yeah. So,
but has he been real vocal about it?
No, we haven't heard that yet.
That is also the strongest counter to the cut him now argument. Why voluntarily remove a proven NFL receiver before you know what the younger group looks like when games count? Training camp can tell you that a rookie deserves opportunity. It cannot fully tell you how that rookie handles disguised coverages, physical corners, third and long, a hostile road environment, or the moment when a defense takes away his favorite release and forces him to adjust. Veterans matter partly because they have already seen those situations. And Jeudy does not appear, at least from what is discussed here, to be publicly creating a problem over targets. That is significant. If he were demanding the football while younger players were earning larger roles, Cleveland would have a different issue. But wanting targets privately is normal for a receiver. Publicly undermining the offense would be something else entirely, and this discussion says there has not been evidence of that. So now the roster decision becomes more complicated. Cutting Jeudy could clear the runway for younger players. Keeping him could protect those same players from being asked to carry too much, too soon. And if you think this offense may eventually belong to Shedder Sanders, that second point becomes even more important.
On this, I want things to be...
last year we didn't have any other options.
Right.
No.
I want things to be as easy on Concepcion and Boston as humanly possible. Like, this is just... Like, Boston came into camp immediately, and he was high-pointing everything, and he was boxing guys out. He was skying up to make grabs. But then you noticed as we got further along in practice, like, he couldn't get any separation against Denzel Ward.
Yes.
And that's Denzel Ward. But he's going to go up against, better guys. So it's like, you don't want to, especially if this all is about Shedeur eventually, you don't want to make it to where it's Shedeur and rookies.
No.
And second-year hair.
That might be the most underrated part of the entire debate. There is a difference between believing in young talent and building an offense that is recklessly young. Boston can impress immediately and still have limitations. The example they give is perfect. Early in camp, he is high-pointing throws, boxing defenders out, and making the kind of contested catches that make coaches start imagining Sundays. Then he sees Denzel Ward, and separation becomes much more difficult. That does not mean Boston is failing. Denzel Ward is exactly the kind of defender who exposes what a young receiver still has to learn. The NFL does that every week. And if Cleveland's longer-term plan really does include Shedder Sanders taking over at quarterback, surrounding him exclusively with developing receivers could create a completely unnecessary degree of difficulty. Young quarterback, young receivers, young tight end, timing still developing, route adjustments still developing, protection potentially uncertain. That is how a promising offense becomes unstable very quickly. Jeudy's value may therefore have less to do with being spectacular and more to do with reducing volatility. A veteran receiver who understands spacing, recognizes coverage, and can collect routine first downs gives a quarterback answers when the glamorous play is not available. You do not build an NFL offense entirely from highlight clips. Someone has to be where the quarterback expects him to be on 3rd and 6. That is why this roster decision cannot be evaluated through camp production alone. If the Browns believe Boston and Concepcion are ready to contribute, great. If they believe that means those players are ready to shoulder the entire passing game, that is a much bigger gamble.
Dangerous place to be.
Well, and going back to what Ryan Fitzpatrick said, like that's part of the reason why Deshaun would start is he's the veteran, can throw with better anticipation, and you got rookies out there. And maybe that's what Jerry Jeudy's been quietly thinking without actually saying it. I mean, it would go to stand about the truth of the matter of it. But if the money's already paid, and I got two other, like last year, I thought it was pretty easy to bracket Jerry Jeudy. Harold Fannin ended up being like, I think at first they didn't respect Harold Fannin. I think as the season went on, they certainly respected Harold Fannin. And then you had to play a little bit better defense.
And now the quarterback issue connects directly to the receiver decision. The argument made here is that veteran quarterback play can matter when the offense is filled with young targets because anticipation becomes more important. A veteran quarterback may throw the ball before the receiver looks open because he trusts the route, understands the coverage, and knows where the window will appear. A younger quarterback often needs those relationships built through repetition. That is why changing both sides of the equation simultaneously can be dangerous. If you transition at quarterback while also stripping away veteran receiving experience, you are asking multiple inexperienced pieces to solve NFL problems together in real time. Could it work? Absolutely. But that is not the same as saying it is the safest way to develop them. This is where Jeudy's case gets stronger without anybody needing to pretend he has been consistently dominant. You can acknowledge the drops. You can acknowledge the frustrating body language discussed in the clip. You can acknowledge that his career has had high-level flashes mixed with uneven stretches. The question is whether the Browns are better with that imperfect veteran than without him. And because Tillman is reportedly being released, Cleveland has already shown that incumbency will not protect everyone. That makes every remaining receiver's role more meaningful.
Against him. But you think about last year, they had so few options, especially after the Quinshon Judkins injury. Like, there were so few options to throw to that really anybody who played quarterback, you were going to be trying to force the football in there to Jerry Jeudy anytime you threw because you knew that he was the option that you had. Like, you can't count on Cedric Tillman. You really couldn't count on a lot of other people. I know Isaiah Bond slipped past the defense every now and then, but that's not really conducting an offense. Jerry Jeudy helps you go collect first downs, take time off the clock, manage a football game, and go win a football game.
This is the section that really explains why the Tillman move matters. Last season, according to this discussion, Cleveland simply did not have enough trustworthy receiving options. Defenses could focus resources on Jeudy because there were fewer consequences elsewhere. That changes how you evaluate his production. A receiver facing concentrated coverage because the offense lacks credible alternatives is being asked to solve a harder problem than that same receiver operating inside a balanced group. Now imagine the opposite. Concepcion wins underneath. Boston forces a defensive back to respect size and contested catchability. Bond threatens vertically. Harold Fannin becomes someone the defense cannot ignore. Suddenly, Jeudy is seeing different leverage, different safety rotations, and potentially cleaner matchups. That does not guarantee a breakout. It does create a more favorable ecosystem. And there is another detail buried in this clip that matters more than flashy camp numbers: moving the chains. First downs are not glamorous. They do not dominate social media in August. But if Jeudy can become the player who settles a drive on third down, turns an 8-yard completion into manageable field position, and keeps the offense from constantly exposing the quarterback to obvious passing situations, that has real value. Especially if Cleveland is still uncertain about the offensive line and running game. A receiver room is not simply a ranking from most talented to least talented. It is an ecosystem of complementary jobs. The Browns have to decide whether Jeudy still owns one of those jobs.
And if he's the only guy out there, then you can eliminate him. All right. Or if he's just out there with Harold Fannin like he was most of the year, you could definitely help still eliminate him and still go out there and win a football game. But now that you have Jerry Jeudy with these other two, I understand that Jerry was pretty cantankerous last year and is not a favorite to a lot of the media out there. But I am willing to give him a fresh start to see with KC Concepcion and Denzel Boston, because I think that two literal threats, two guys that I think can be very good for this football.
And this is where the payoff starts to come into focus. The younger receivers may not be pushing Jeudy off the roster. They may be creating the best argument for keeping him. That sounds backward until you look at the coverage math. If Jeudy is the only credible perimeter target, a defense can tilt coverage toward him, challenge the other receivers to win, and make the entire passing game operate through narrow windows. If Cleveland suddenly has three receivers who must be respected, the defense loses that luxury. That means the Browns could finally evaluate Jeudy in something closer to a complementary role instead of repeatedly asking him to be the solution. And there is a major strategic difference between those two jobs. The first asks whether Jerry Jeudy can carry a receiver room. The second asks whether Jerry Jeudy can punish a defense that is no longer allowed to obsess over Jerry Jeudy. That second question is much more favorable to him. It also explains why simply looking at camp target totals or ranking the receivers from first through fourth could be misleading. If Cleveland believes Concepcion and Boston have earned major snaps, the goal does not have to be replacing Jeudy. The goal can be putting all three on the field and forcing defenses to make choices. Which corner takes Jeudy? Who handles Boston's size? Who follows Concepcion through motion? Does the safety stay high because Bond can run? Where does that leave the tight end? Now you are creating conflicts instead of asking one receiver to win a difficult matchup repeatedly. That is how depth becomes multiplicative instead of redundant. And this is exactly why the Tillman release sends a much stronger signal about roster philosophy than any rumor surrounding Jeudy by itself. Cleveland appears willing to choose players based on how the room fits together, not simply based on who has been there the longest.
Football team can make Jerry Jeudy better, because covering three of them, like, it's the one thing that I think we got really going for us into this year. I don't know what we're going to have with our offensive line. Spencer Fano is only 1/5. I got to see more of it. The running backs, all right, it still goes with the offensive line, because you can have, they got better in game 2, but I can still have a situation where I have 21 carries and 31 yards like I did a couple of weeks ago in the opener of the preseason. So I'm not sure about that. Defensively, we talked about that, but let's stick to offense here.
But there is one final complication, and it might ultimately decide everything. The receiver room cannot be evaluated in isolation. The speaker openly admits uncertainty about the offensive line and the running game. That matters enormously, because if Cleveland cannot consistently run the football, then keeping multiple viable receivers becomes more important, not less. When the running game works, an offense can protect inexperienced receivers with play action, favorable down and distance, and simpler reads. When the running game struggles, everybody in the passing game gets exposed. Third and long arrives more often. Defensive linemen can attack without respecting the run. Safeties can disguise coverage. Corners can sit aggressively on routes because they know the quarterback has to throw. That is not the environment where you voluntarily remove veteran options unless you are certain the replacements are ready. So the real Jerry Jeudy decision is not, is he the fourth best receiver in August? It is not, do fans like him? It is not even, is his salary uncomfortable compared with what the younger players cost? The real question is whether Cleveland can construct a better functioning offense without him than with him. If the answer is clearly yes, then a difficult roster move becomes understandable. But based on the football case presented here, I do not think the decision is nearly that simple. Jeudy brings flaws. Nobody in this discussion denies them. His consistency has been questioned. His drops have been questioned, his body language has been questioned, and when young players start flashing around an expensive veteran, those criticisms naturally become louder because fans begin imagining what the offense could look like if the team simply moved on. But NFL roster building is not fantasy football. You do not automatically replace an established receiver because a rookie won a week of training camp. The Browns need to know whether Concepcion can consistently separate against starting NFL corners. They need to know whether Boston can handle more than contested catches and use his physical advantages when defensive backs begin changing technique against him. They need to know whether Bond can become more than a player who occasionally gets behind a defense. They need to know how all of those receivers respond after opposing coordinators have enough film to attack their weaknesses. That takes regular season evidence. Jeudy gives Cleveland insurance while they collect it. And there is another reason that insurance matters. Quarterback development is rarely linear. If Watson starts, a veteran receiver provides continuity. If Sheeter eventually takes over, that veteran can give the younger quarterback a target who has already faced NFL coverage structures for years. If injuries hit the room, suddenly the player who looked unnecessary in August can become essential by October. This is why roster depth feels excessive right up until the moment it disappears. The smartest teams are constantly balancing future upside against present stability. Cleveland's young receivers represent upside. Jeudy represents a degree of known NFL experience. The Browns do not necessarily have to choose one philosophy immediately. They can force Jeudy to earn his snaps while still benefiting from his presence. And if Concepcion or Boston eventually proves beyond doubt that Jeudy is no longer necessary, then Cleveland can approach the next decision from a position of information instead of excitement. That is the part of this story that gets lost when the discussion becomes Cedric Tillman is gone, so Jerry Jeudy must be next. Tillman being released does not automatically create a chain reaction. It creates competition. And competition is only useful if the Browns make decisions based on what helps the offense rather than on who generates the loudest camp storyline. There is also a larger message in what Cleveland appears to be doing. Spending early 2026 draft capital on wide receivers means this front office knew the room needed change. Younger players are not arriving merely to sit behind veterans indefinitely. They are being given an opportunity to take jobs. That should make Jeudy uncomfortable. It should make every veteran uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the same thing as inevitability. If Jeudy responds to the competition and becomes more efficient because defenses have to respect the players around him, Cleveland could end up getting more value from him precisely because his role becomes smaller. That would be ironic, considering the current conversation. The very players being used as evidence that Jeudy is replaceable might be the players who make him most effective. And that brings us back to the quarterback question. If this entire offensive transition is eventually supposed to position Shedeur Sanders for success, then Cleveland should be obsessed with one thing: creating easy answers. Easy answers come from separation. They come from coverage conflicts. They come from veterans recognizing blitz adjustments. They come from a receiver being exactly where the quarterback expects him when the pocket starts collapsing. They come from having enough credible weapons that one mistake by a defensive back becomes a completion somewhere else. A young quarterback does not need the youngest possible offense around him. He needs the most functional offense possible. There is a huge difference. And this receiver competition may tell us a lot about how the Browns view that distinction. If they keep Jeudy while Boston and Concepcion continue rising, that is not necessarily Cleveland being afraid to move on from a veteran. It could be Cleveland recognizing that the best version of the room includes all of them. If they move Jeudy, then the standard should be equally clear. It should mean the Browns believe the younger receivers are ready to absorb the routes, the pressure, and the defensive attention that comes with his departure. Not eventually, right now. Because once the regular season begins, development stops being theoretical. A third down drop ends a possession. A missed route adjustment can create an interception. A failure to separate can turn a quarterback's hesitation into a sack. Those are the margins Cleveland will actually be judged on. So after all the speculation, this is where I land. Cedric Tillman reportedly being released absolutely raises the temperature in that receiver room, and Jeudy should not be considered untouchable simply because of his contract or veteran status. But cutting him purely because the younger players have looked impressive would be solving a problem Cleveland may not actually have. The Browns finally appear to have multiple receivers creating legitimate competition. Use it. Make Jeudy prove he deserves the snaps. Make Boston prove he can win against starting corners. Make Concepcion prove the camp production translates when coordinators are game planning specifically for him. Make Bond prove that speed can become dependable weekly offense. Then let the depth chart reveal itself through actual football. Because the goal is not to win the argument over which receiver fans are most excited about in August. The goal is to give whichever quarterback takes control of this team the deepest, most difficult to defend group Cleveland can realistically put on the field. So now you have to make the call. If you are running the Browns, do you keep Jerry Jeudy and let these young receivers make him better, or do you move on now and hand the room to the next generation? Drop your choice in the comments, and if you want more Browns quarterback and roster breakdowns without the rumor being treated like fact, like the video and subscribe.